Hello, welcome to Towle Talks. I actually bought a new mic. I don't know if you can see, you can't really see it, but I bought a new mic. It's worth it. Hopefully this will make my sound much better. Today we're going to talk about prefabs and how to make bullets. So once again, we want to be able to make bullets. We want to spawn not just bullets, but we want to spawn objects. We're going to have to dynamically create objects in our game. How do we do this? Well, we're going to use a thing that's called prefabs. So I'm going to break this up into 3 different little movies. The first one, we're going to talk about how to create the prefab and how to instantiate it in code instead of just simply dragging it onto the screen. So that's the simple prefabs. We'll deal with how to fix the tank on the next episode. Until then, this has been Towle Talks. Cheers. Hello, and welcome to the first lecture in prefabs. So I have a simple project I've set up. Don't panic about all this stuff. We're going to go through it. First of all, I have a regular new project, new scene, and what I've done is I've made a platform, just a large square, and I've given it a rigid body. It is kinematic. This isn't going to go anywhere. This is going to be our platform. I made a cube. We called it the tank. We'll talk about the materials a little bit later. And then I made a cylinder. So here's the cube's values. I made the cylinder, and what I did is you can move this cylinder around, but what I did is I rotated the cylinder 90 degrees on the z-axis, and I scaled it by 0.3, 0.3, 0.3 to give the tank's turret, per se. And we're not going to have any wheels on our tank at the moment, so we'll just deal with that. Again, you can pause the game or pause the movie if you need to. There actually is going to be nothing else on the turret. On the tank itself, there's going to be a rigid body, and it's going to use gravity. Also notice that the cylinder is a child of tank, so wherever I move the tank, the cylinder is sure to go. So the next question you have is, how did I get this really awesome color of red? So I want to take a little bit of time and talk about project organization and prefabs in this one. And we've already talked a little bit about this, but this becomes really, really important. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to make a scene folder and save my scene. I called it test. So go ahead, right click, create new folder, and then call it scene, and then save the scene. That's it. That's like standard practice, first thing you do when you make a project. Second thing is I want to make a tank folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm expand the tank folder, or make a tank folder just like I did a scene. And I'm going to make 2 folders, one for material and one for scripts. Again, all of these subfolders are going to go into whatever the parent folder is talking about. So in this case, this is all for tank. So I make 2 new subfolders, material and scripts. I go into my materials. I'm going to create a new material. So right click, create new material. I do not need to make my own shader. So create new material. I'll click on the material, and then right here you should see use the standard shader, and we'll say this main map will be to red. So let's call it red. And that will give us the nice little red we're seeing here. Once we have this material, we just drag it onto the tank body itself, and now we have a red tank. Scripts, we're going to come back to. We're going to make a script here, so we'll come back to this in a moment, but that's where we're going to put our script. Now, another thing that we want to start thinking about in terms of, do we want multiple tanks? In this situation, we're only going to have 1 tank, but it is believable that there could be a contingency out there where we want a bunch of tank objects, and maybe it's a war, maybe it's different players, whatever it's going to be. So we want a bunch of different tank objects. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click, create a new folder, and we're going to call it prefabs. So if your object's going to have a prefab, we want to have a subfolder for the prefab. We'll open up the prefab folder, take the tank, select the tank itself, and drag it down and just add it to the prefab folder. Now you'll see a 3D rendering of the tank, and that now I can actually use this and instantiate a bunch of different tank objects. Again, we're not going to do that today, but that was just to show you the idea behind what a prefab is going to be. So the next thing we want to do is we want to have the tank shoot something. I mean, that's the whole point of the tank, right? So we're going to create a bullet. And what I did here is I created a 3D object, sphere. I actually made a bullet file, a folder, and I made its own little material, which is just yellow, and I assigned that material to the bullet. So now I have, and I also scaled the bullet to 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, so it looks like it could fit outside of the barrel. So go ahead and pause the video until you have the bullet created. Don't worry about making the prefab yet. We're just going to make the bullet at the moment. So now that you have the bullet made, we want the tank to shoot out bullets when I hit fire. We could do this one of two ways. We could have like maybe 3 or 4 of these bullets made, and whenever I fire, I teleport the bullet's position right here and then give it a velocity. And I'd have like a pool of bullets I could use and just teleport the bullets here and fire them out. That's what we call a stupid solution. I mean, it actually was useful back in the day. There was something similar to what they did in the old school gaming consoles, because they would have a limited number of bullets and a limited number of RAM on the machines. So you would actually limit the bullets this way, and you would have a predefined set of bullets and just teleport them down or set them to whatever location needed, and then use the bullet mechanism. And the bullet would have to go away after a certain amount of time, so you could shoot another bullet. So this was a mechanism used to reduce memory, but it's not a good mechanism anymore. What we're going to do instead is we're going to instantiate, or we're going to create a script that's going to spawn these dynamically. And how we spawn objects is going to be just like we do when we drag and drop objects on here. We're going to want to use prefabs. So again, it becomes very, very important that you have good project organization. So we right-click, make a new folder called Bullet, if you haven't already done it. We should already have the material subfolder. We're going to make another folder called Prefab. And again, we'll just drag our bullet down here. One thing about the bullet is it does have a rigid body, and that's the only thing I've added to the bullet, is it has a rigid body. So now we have the bullet, we have an object or a prefab that describes the bullet we want to spawn. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our tank folder, go to scripts, and we're going to create a new C# script here. Now that we have the new C# script, we'll open this up. And basically we're going to have a public class variable, public game object. Now this is not the bullet we're going to instantiate. This is the game object that we want to instantiate. So this isn't the thing that we create. This is like the template, if you will, of the thing we want to create. And this actually, I feel embarrassed for it, but I'll confess this. It took me a long time to figure out how to set the game object prefab we just set to this variable. I'll show you in a moment. I actually ended up doing a roundabout way of setting it. So we want to have a public game object bullet, and yes, it does need to be public because we want something outside to set this. We're going to use the editor to set this value. Then in update, we're going to say if input.getAccess, remember this is how we get inputs, fire1 is greater than 0, that means I want to fire a bullet. So what we're going to do is we're going to do game object temp. This is just so we have a pointer to the object we just created, equals game object.instantiate. Now this is going to change if and when we get to networking. And then here is going to take the template or the thing I want to create from, which is bullet. Now right now bullet has not been initialized, but we're going to set this outside of the class. Then I'm going to say take this bullet I've just created, set the transform.position to this .transform.position, so I'll set it to the tank's position. Then I'm going to say temp.getComponent rigid body, just like I would if I was doing a rigid body for the tank itself. And then I'll set the velocity to a new vector 3, 5, 0, 0. So ideally we should see the bullet fly to the right at the speed of 5 with the effect of gravity when we fire this object. We're not, but also we'll see why that happens in a moment. So this is a naive approach a little bit. We're setting it to the same position as our tank object, and our tank object and our bullet object both have rigid bodies. Most of the time, a bullet object will not have a rigid body. It'll be a trigger event. We'll talk about that on the next set of lectures, I believe. We'll save this. We'll go back over to our Unity. Now what we want to do is we want to apply this script to our tank. So we can just drag this up to the tank, or we can go click on our tank and scroll down, add component, script, tank. It's very important you don't forget the next step. See here under our tank script, we have this thing that says bullet, and it says it's going to say none for you. You have to set this value bullet on the script that's attached to the tank. You cannot go down here and then try to select it here. It won't work. You have to go to the tank and then select the script that's attached to the tank, set this to be bullet. So you can just click here and you'll see bullet. Go ahead and double click that, and now bullet will be looking at a template of the bullet object we made, and we'll be spawning bullets. So now we get to fire the tank. Ready? So we're going to launch the game, and you see this is the bullet that just left over. 3, 2, 1. I hit left click to fire for default fire 1. Oh gosh. That is not what we expected. So what happened here is, you see I spawned a bunch of bullets and they started flying off the screen, but I spawned it inside the rigid body, which means I now have this weird instantaneous collision with two rigid bodies inside each other, and physics kind of goes haywire at that point. So next video, we're going to fix this.